Big names in Brisbane, a potential Australian dominance, and hybrid sport going deadly down under. Hello and welcome to On the Rocks podcast with me, Coach Marshy. Hope everyone is well. And I'm really excited about this episode because I get to talk about lots of things that I follow for years and years, but also the growth of our now growing sport worldwide in multiple different disciplines. So let's welcome today's guest into the show. Hello, Bernice. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Coach Marshy. I'm really excited to chat with you. I know we've been trying to tee this up for a little while now.
Yeah, I mean, being all the way over the other side of the world to each other is a barrier, but now thanks to this contraption, we're called the internet and this StreamYard and everything else that we use in terms of software, we're able to do this. So it's great to have you on the show and welcome. So I just want to sort of set the tone, and you know, I followed you months ago now when you sort of set up your podcast and your hybrid sport media. And for me, you were covering something that I was finding hard to find out, which was what was going on a long way away from me. It was very easy to keep up with what's going on in the whole hybrid space in Europe, but to find out what was going on all the way over in Australia, New Zealand and Asia was quite difficult. And then all of a sudden you were there and we had this platform to check in on. So sort of, who are you? What's your background? And why did you decide to do what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I think you've pretty much nailed the reason as to the why I decided to do what I'm doing now. And I should actually say that it's really a we, and that we is my brother and I. So some people may have heard of him. Goes by the name of James Kelly, or actually goes by the name of JK, which I'm sorry to all your listeners, Coach Marshy, I can't get around the JK. He's actually Jim to me, or Jimmy Jam. He will absolutely hate me for saying that, but I will call him Jimmy Jam nonetheless. So James and I probably had a conversation. I think it was actually around the Nice World Championships, so less than a year ago. It's actually crazy to me to think that it's only been a matter of about 8 months that we've been running this platform. It feels like a lifetime, if I'm being honest, but we kind of had a conversation around the fact that there's such great platforms, like yourself, like Ian K over at UKHXR, like Hybrid Fitness Media in the USA, but there was no one really representing, as you say, the Australian, New Zealand, Asian Pacific market, and the sport itself. And, I'm sure we'll get into it, not just Hyrox, but hybrid as a fitness event, as a fitness competition, is just growing so much here down under. It's probably taken a little while longer than yourselves over in the UK, also those in the USA. That could have been a little bit to do with COVID and the lockdowns and the fact that Hyrox only came here in 2023, and that was really one of the first and probably the biggest hybrid fitness competition now here down under. We've got a few others that are popping up, but it's growing so rapidly. I've been there at almost every single Australian Hyrox event since it opened here, and to see how it has grown from 2023, the first event in Sydney, to the very recent event we had just here on the weekend in Brisbane. We had 10,000 athletes competing. I mean, back then in Sydney, I think there were, I don't want to get this incorrectly, but I think it was like less than 3,000. I think it was something like 2,000 athletes. So it is just growing substantially. I have no doubt we're going to reach the same, size and popularity as you guys have in the UK. So I'm just really excited to be a part of all of that.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting actually. And you when you talk about comparisons to the UK, obviously Hyrox has been around a long time, but in terms of like the UK, the second, third season was at London XL. We saw a record breaker of double figures in terms of thousands And now you guys have replicated that as well in your second season. That's happened, and here we are, and the growth seems mad. And my observation is when you went live for the mixed doubles in Brisbane, you were battling through the crowd like we do in the UK, and it looked like, you see other countries and they're growing fast, but you get these live videos and you don't get the impression that these people are battling through a crowd to go and watch, whereas you were battling through, and I went, wow, that looks exactly like what would happen in a UK event.
It definitely was. I should point out that those who I was live streaming, which was the likes of Clair Toomey and James Newbury from the CrossFit circles, as well as Hunter McIntyre and Joanna Weitrzyk. I'm sure we'll get into the Brisbane race just on the weekend, but I think having those names in the race definitely brought along the crowd. That was the busiest it had been all weekend. But you're right, Coach Marshy, it was just insane, the crowds. At some points during that live stream, you probably saw that I was just at a standstill. I honestly could not move. It was like herding sheep. It was that crowded. It was that packed. And yet this year, the Brisbane venue, it was even bigger than last year. They'd extended it. So Hyrox, they do an incredible job, as we all know, with those venue setups. But I do believe that our, Hyrox events in particular, they're only going to get bigger and better down here. We did do a recent episode actually with Matt Locke, who is the Hyrox APAC manager. Absolutely fantastic guy. If anyone knows him, he's always up for a chat. He'll probably hate me saying that now because he's so busy at Hyrox events. But he said that we are definitely on our way to being as big as you guys in the UK, to have, those numbers of, what do you guys get there now? Is it around 16,000 per event for a 3 or 4 day event?
Yeah, that's like London Excel end of 2024. That's exactly what happened. It grew substantially from the year before, which was 12,000, and then it grew to 2024. It was sort of up at 16,000 athletes, which is a huge number of people. And obviously we're on the eve of Glasgow Major as well. It's going to be big, because that's over 4 days as well. So we'll see what the turnout really is, but it's going to be huge. And the trajectory of the Australian curve here, in terms of the venues, are they able to be bigger then?
They will be. I think what they're looking at for this year and this particular season will be the biggest that they can be. So the Brisbane event, as I mentioned, they were able to extend that to an even, it just felt so much longer than it was last year. And that's because they were able to extend that to a whole nother room at the convention centre there. I believe Matt Locke mentioned they're doing the same here in Sydney. So we always have it out there at Sydney Olympic Park. Some people might know of that venue from Olympics time back into the 2000s.
I'm old enough. I'm old enough to remember your Olympics.
So am I.
Yeah.
That's sad. Shows our age. But as far as I know, they're trying to make the event venues bigger and better. And I know there's some really exciting plans in the works for Melbourne that I won't mention because that's Hyrox's place. But stay tuned for that, because I think when Hyrox announces that, you'll have some very excited Melbourneites.
And do you think it can go in sort of every major city in Australia? Because in the UK now, there's definitely speculation about new cities coming into this because of literally the growth is so big. We're going to need the weekends just to serve the people, really.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Matt Locke did mention to us, they've got multiple sets of equipment now, which is great, that are housed down here in Australia. How they have tapered the season out now in Australia is fantastic. I'm not sure if your listeners would know, but last year we had kind of back-to-back Hyrox events here down under. So off the top of my head, I think we had Melbourne first, and then about 3 or 4 weeks later, it was Sydney. And then I think it was 3 weeks later, it was Brisbane. And then about a month later, it was Perth. So it was all kind of in the matter of, 3.5 months. And I think it was too much. And I think Hyrox has even said that it didn't work with shipping the equipment between events. So they've now been able to spread out our season. We had Brisbane this year in March, just gone by this past weekend. We've then got Sydney coming up in July. We'll have Perth in September, followed by Melbourne in December. And we, of course, had New Zealand as well back in February. And I think that is their plan to kind of spread out those 5 events. However, I would never be surprised if we throw in, Adelaide or Tasmania there eventually. I think the hardest thing, I don't know if Hyrox has had these, challenges over in the UK, is finding the right venue. It's finding that big enough size for not just a Hyrox event, but the capacity of athletes and spectators you're going to have. I think it is really difficult to find the right venue.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that you guys will have over us is that people can probably go outside more often and just be outside the venue, whereas most of our winter season is, we need a venue that can host people indoors because we've got nowhere to go, but thanks to our lovely climate. But I think, you talk about growth and how it's developing, and, I've never been down under, but going to New Zealand for you guys is, I guess, like going to Europe for us on a plane. It's, you hop on a plane and you can do that. So it would all become part of a wider season for people if they just are happy to travel a few hours on a plane, right? It
definitely is. And I guess for context, I mean, to fly to New Zealand, say where I'm from Sydney, would probably be 3.5 hours, I'm going to guess, on a flight. For me to fly to Perth, which is still within my same country, actually takes longer. That takes about 5 hours. So it really is all in the same hemisphere, if you say that.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense, and that's great, because then at least it will be readily available, and as it grows, people will be able to compete. And I would have said, you were in Nice as well, and I would have said when the walk-ins came in, there were a lot of Australians compared to 2023, and we did notice in Manchester, obviously very easy for us to attend that early on in our Hyrox journey, but we attended Manchester, and you watched sort of the New Zealand flag comes up and the walk in and the Aussie flag, and there wasn't many, because they were probably just people that lived in and around Europe that had qualified as Kiwis or as Aussies. They had qualified, and then they decided they could get to Manchester because it was easy for them. But in Nice, it looked completely different to that. I was like, oh God, look at the difference. They've definitely qualified this year because you were there en masse.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And I think, we kind of touched on it at the beginning, but that would have been partly due to the fact that our Hyrox seasons didn't really even start till July 2023. So post, those World Championships in, what was that, Birmingham?
Manchester, that was, yeah.
Oh, Manchester, that's right. But yeah, let alone Nice, and let alone how it's going to go this year in Chicago. I have a feeling, I think my brother has told me there was about just a little under 100 Australian athletes who competed at the World Championships just this past season with the Nice World Championships. I think there's going to be at least double. At least. I would never be surprised if it was almost triple the amount of athletes because, I mean, let's be honest, as you say, there's quite a dominance happening in Australia with our athletes.
Yeah, and we're going to get onto that in a minute, actually, because I'm really excited about something that might not even happen, but we'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of the growth for me here on the Rocks, you actually now make it that we've had more Aussies than we've had Americans on the show, so that's saying something as well.
I like that.
We've had your brother and Georgie, now fiance, we see on Instagram. I believe we saw a proposal. Did we see that?
That's right, they did. James did pop the question just over Christmas, and I didn't know that one was coming, but he actually proposed. Might surprise some listeners, or maybe it won't if you know James well enough. He proposed in the ocean, and I remember he told me afterwards that he'd done it in the ocean, and I just thought, oh my God, you're game. What if you lost that ring?
Yeah. Well, losing rings and proposing was on my agenda at the end of last year as well, but I decided to do it on the Hyrox stage. So
that's right, you did too. I did tell James he should have done that.
that would have been really cool if he'd have done that.
Would have been very fitting.
Yeah, it would have been really, really sort of like their thing, right, as well. We'll get onto those two in a minute, actually, because they're really interesting, and I really like them. But in terms of like Australian dominance, now, if we think about last year and the relay, there was like JK put a team together, and he had to pick from a certain pool of people. That pool of people's changed a lot, and it's not that clear whether is there gonna be a relay. I did check, but it looks like there's gonna be a relay.
I've heard so. I'd be shocked if there wasn't, because I think it was such a popular event last year. And I know, I won't give anything away here, but I know James is already ticking over as to who he would like within that team if he is chosen as captain. I think that's the other thing that they're not too sure about yet, if it will be run the same way where the team captain will be allocated from Hyrox. For context for everyone, that's how it worked last year. Look, they might do it differently this year, or they might choose different team captains, because as I'm sure we're about to get into, Coach Marshy, it's that JK is not the only dominant Australian in the mix anymore.
No, but on that note, and no pressure on you to give anything away whatsoever, but for anyone who's watching this from the outside, especially the English, so we were classed as England in that race because we had England, Ireland, Scotland. We were split up into not, we weren't the UK, but from an England point of view, we won the race. The guys were brilliant. And you guys sort of came somewhere back there, yeah? No one was really watching. Everyone who watched that race, who's into Hyrox now, I can guarantee you we're all looking at this going, JK, Joe Weitrzyk, James Newbury, Toomey. Everyone else might as well not even bother turning up. Which could put them under some sort of like target on their back if that's how it does indeed go. But what a team that would be. That would be unbelievable. And I would lie if I said, like, me and my mate Tatey and everyone just now in the class that I've just come from, we're buzzing that this could happen. Like that could even be a possibility this year. That would be unbelievable.
It would be unbelievable to even be able to watch that. And the amazing thing is that's not the only dominance that we have. That's not the only caliber to pick from. I mean, if James is chosen as the team captain yet again, he's going to have some tough choices to make, because you've also got the likes of John Wynn, an Elite 15 athlete. You've got the likes of Jess Petro as well, who's also been, racing within each major this season. So it's going to be some tough choices for James. Thankfully, Beau Wills is New Zealand, and hopefully they will split those teams up yet again. But yeah, it will be an incredible race to watch. And I'd almost probably put money on whoever the team is for Australia. I think they could give England a run for their money.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've got a new girl in the mix, obviously with Lucy. Mm-hmm. That's been, we saw that come in. Faisal came on this show and he called it. He said that she'll be world champion one day. I mean, she might have to wait for Joe to go first, but I think like there are some really good stars coming through, and the relay looks like a really potential, if they run it the same, potentially one of the most exciting parts of the whole weekend of Worlds.
It definitely is. Did you watch it yourself last year? I unfortunately had already flown out, but I heard it was incredible to even just be there and watch it.
It was better. It was, I don't know, I guess because of my association with with Meg, I was really happy that she won, and I was really grateful to be able to see that in the flesh. And we'd met Hunter and JK as well, probably beyond just the kind of photo opportunity, if that makes sense. So again, it was great to watch that unfold with then our own British athlete in Sandy as well. So it was great to watch that unfold. But actually, the relay part for me as a fan was by far the most entertaining and exciting moment of the whole weekend, which I don't know if Hyrox did it on purpose and they knew that it would be like that, but it was really clever that it came right at the end. There was no anti-climax after the Elite 15 race. There was still this like excitement at the end, which was fantastic. So yeah, no, it was awesome, and it was ace, and I look forward to Chicago as well. Hopefully, if they do it the same way, it would be entertaining. I think it would be the way to do it.
It would be, because I'm sure that you wouldn't even be able to tell half the time who's in the lead. Like, we all know that, in the Elite 15 races, that anything can happen up until those wall balls. at a relay, that's just heightened to a next level. I give Zara credit in the England team because she really kept her cool against Meg Jacoby at the end there to still take out the win. But it's one of those races that anything could be happening that you're not really aware of. So to be able to keep track of that, I really hope that it's the same as last year and we have a really good race on our hands.
Yeah, no, it'll be ace. And like you say, if Zara hadn't gone unbroken, Meg would have got her. And that was how close it was. So, it was brilliant to watch. And like you said, hopefully we're there and we're all there with our cameras and we're cracking on. So that'll be great. And talking about that dominance, let's talk about the guys that you've just mentioned there, because obviously, John's probably been the other Aussie male up until this point. Anyone who's been in and around Hyrox will have definitely be aware of who he is. And he was, I remember JK talking about it, and it was like an elephant in the room that he wasn't in the team, wasn't it, for the relay itself last year. And I think, he's a very good athlete, and same with Jess as well. And then, looking through your kind of report of Brisbane, that there looks like there are some really good athletes coming through as well that we might not hear of on the elite stage right now, but give them another year of Hyrox or so, and we might just be hearing about them as well.
There definitely are. And look, I'm sure it's happening all over the globe, but I guess we've got to keep in mind that the sport is just still growing so rapidly here in Australia that I think you're absolutely right. There's some of these athletes that we're seeing kind of win these pro events here, or even the double events. I mean, we've got some incredible Elite 15 doubles qualifiers now within the mix for the first ever, Elite 15 doubles race. It's going to be coming up in Chicago. So we definitely do have so many names that I just would never be surprised to see, on the start line of an Elite 15, major or LCQ or World Championships one day. It'll be interesting to see how the Aussies go at the age group World Championships. That will be interesting to see against the other countries, because I am conscious that while we have these amazing athletes here, the sport is just growing so rapidly worldwide that the caliber is just so high. So as I say, it'll be great to see them out on that competitive field and really see how they stack up against the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I think when we go back to what we said at the beginning of the show with the growth, I think when you look at sort of like when I say Australian dominance and I talk about like the US athletes and the UK athletes, if you look at how our events are growing, there's obviously going to be like a bigger pool of people that we're picking from because there's more people doing Hyrox. But in terms of like ratios, when you look at Spain and some of the other European nations, they're starting to grow now, and you're starting to see people sneak in as well. And, I'm sure it'll happen in Canada, and I'm sure it will happen in some of the smaller countries that we don't yet hear much about. And you're right, it will inevitably be a worldwide thing, and the standard is therefore just going to increase. I don't know if you agree with that, but it's just going to keep going up and up and up.
Well, I think we've seen it already in the Elite 15 fields for this season. I mean, some of your listeners, if they do listen to my podcast at all, Hybrid Sport Media, I often do these preview eps with Ian Kay from UK HXR into each of the majors. And it's incredible, as you would have seen, Coach Marshy, the time difference in between these Elite 15 athletes is seconds. It's honestly seconds. I mean, that Amsterdam race, the men's race, I think off the top of my head, between 4th and 11th place finishing, there was less than 60 seconds. Like, that's how close we're talking. And for this race coming up in Glasgow, I know that the top 15 men who have qualified, their times are all under 57 minutes. That's the bar now. Like, that's what the standard is for the men's. If that's where we're at in 2025, it blows my mind to think where we're going to be with the sport of Hyrox in, say, 2027, 2028, what those times are going to be, because it's only going to get better as sports do.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned loads of things we could unpack there, but when we look specifically and you talk about like 60 seconds, if we think back to like maybe CrossFit and the journey of CrossFit, I think like there became a point probably about 10 years in, about 2016, where that the 2%, that extra 1%ers, you could start to pick out the elites. It's kind of when Toomey hit the scene as well. You could find those people, those athletes, through whether it be like the Battery Bros documentaries or whatever it was, that were doing everything that's not involved with actual training, all the other parts of lifestyle, all the recovery, etc. And that's going to now, I think, become a bigger player. I don't know what you guys think and what JK would say, but I think that type of stuff now is going to become, the 1% club. Can you improve by 1%? Can we change that? Can we change that? Can we change that? And I think that's what's going to make a big difference now going forward.
Definitely will. And I think you make such a good point there that there's probably some athletes out there, particularly for us in Australia, because again, I keep going back to the fact that the sport is so new here, but there's probably some athletes out there who haven't even given Hyrox a try yet. And yet they would be brilliant at it. And, I'll use an example of Joanna Weitrzyk. She has been in this sport for less than 12 months. Her first race was in Sydney in July in 2024, which is just insane to think that she has literally been in this sport for 8, maybe 9 months, and yet she is a winner of a major in Hong Kong. She's qualified for the Elite 15. She's about to race in her 4th major of the season. Her whole life has changed because she's found her sport. It's still such a new and growing sport that I think, it's so exciting just to think how far it can go and all of the athletes out there. And it's actually one thing that Ian Kay and I discussed just recently on a podcast was around the fact that we do find it interesting that a lot of the athletes that seem to come from an endurance background, a compromised running type of background, rather than the CrossFit background, seem to be the ones that are really making waves. Do you tend to agree? I mean, Joanna, for example, is from a tennis background and a netball background. So she's got that endurance, that still, compromised work she's using. Not to say the CrossFitters can't make it. They definitely are making their mark, but not as much as these endurance athletes.
Yeah, I think in the short time of our sport of Hyrox, I think we can look back at history, and history definitely backs up what you're saying already, because I think Joanna Weitrzyk is the second person to kind of burst onto the scene, because Meg was the first woman to go sub 1 hour in her second race ever, having come into it off the back of Lauren Weeks really dominating the sport, apart from when the year that she had her baby. So, she dominated, and she was maybe from a endurance background before anyway, but had some CrossFit in her. But then when Meg came in, it was very much like that. Meg was from a running background, track athlete. And then she comes in, bursts onto the scene, and absolutely, basically for the next year, 18 months, dominated with Lauren until Joanna Weitrzyk walks in and literally does the same thing. And am I right in saying that she's still less than double figures in terms of races that she's actually, well, she might be about there now with the doubles that she's done, but it's not a lot of races. There'll be recreational athletes that have got into this and done more than she has in a shorter period of time.
Definitely. I'm just looking. Yeah, I'm just looking here that she's done 14 races.
14 races.
If high result is correct, I think that would probably sound about right. But I recall interviewing Joanna very, very early on, because I remember seeing her results in the Melbourne event and then seeing them a few weeks later in Sydney and going, oh, this girl's got potential here. I think I should maybe have a chat to her. And I'm so glad I did, because look how far she's come. But for a bit of context, for anyone who hasn't heard an interview with Joanna, you should look them up, because she's done a fair few now on podcasts, and she's a great, young athlete to chat to. But that Melbourne race, she raced in the pro and she won, but she forgot her timing chip. No, sorry, she didn't forget it. I think the timing chip stopped working, or she lost it during the race. Something like that happened. So she went the next day and did Women's Open and absolutely smashed that. I think she did, from the top of my head, something like 1 hour and 12 seconds for the Open. now she's looking at doing those times. She's consistently doing around the hour mark for a pro. That's how much she's even just improved in, 6, 7, 8 months. Amazing athlete.
Yeah. And like, we talked about a few of your sort of dominant athletes, but talking about what the press is showing now, and what social media is showing us, JK's flying, right? I mean, you must be so proud. Like when he won that major, that was a great race. So, and we only saw it on the telly. Were you there? I assume you were
was
there.
there. Yeah, I was. I was there with my mum and Georgie. Unfortunately, my husband Dan couldn't make it over, but it was so incredible to even just be there live. As a lot of your listeners would know, it's very different being there live to watching it on the television. I mean, you don't see as much when you're live. Sometimes I like to actually listen to the commentary while I'm there watching it, if I'm there live, just to hear what the commentators are saying about certain stats. But I kind of knew from, I'm going to say, about maybe the rower that James had this race. And for a little bit of context with that, I recall James messaging me on, I'm going to say maybe the Sunday or the Monday before the race that was on the Friday night, I think it was. He had a really bad back injury to the point where he was contemplating whether he'd be able to race or not. And look, long story short, he worked as hard as he could that week to rest, to get into a physio, to do whatever he could. And I don't know if that gave him a little bit of an extra spring in his step, but for whatever reason, he went into that race. And as you saw, he followed his game plan, he executed it, and he came out with the win. And that was one of his goals this season with his coach, Anthony Pericini, was to win a major. And, just to be there to watch it. I mean, obviously, I'm very biased being his sister. I'm more than happy to admit that on any podcast. I think listeners would be surprised if I wasn't saying I didn't want my brother to win. But I think I'm not even biased to say this, but I think he is a hot contender to be world champion this year.
I mean, let's be fair. He got some really. I really enjoyed the media coverage last year because he was the last chance qualifier winner, and that was great because they covered that as best they could from a live point of view on YouTube, and we got to consume that as kind of fans of the sport, and there was a lot of interviews around that because of that. And that's when we had JK on the show as well. And when you sort of listen to him, he wasn't there just to qualify. Like the idea is what's the point in even doing this unless I think I can win, or unless I'm aiming to win, and his I remember his interview with Lauren before the last chance qualifier. It was super cool. Like he was proper, really like mellow, didn't give anything away. Other than, and I think he might, we think he's a little bit known for this now, whatever you do, don't be in the lead after the ski erg, like that type of thing. But he is more than a hot contender for me. Like he's like, he could be, I mean, obviously Alex as well, but like he could be the man to beat. But then we don't really know what Hunter's doing in the background because he's changed his approach a little bit, Hunter, in terms of, it used to be, I'm going to do the world record and I'm going to smash you all out the park. And it was, I don't know if we call that gamesmanship or whatever we want to call it, but that's not Hunter's approach anymore. And it's a lot more measured. It feels like that anyway. So we don't really know what he's up to. We don't really know what Sandy's up to or where Sandy's at. And then we're not even mentioning people like Bo Wills. But how do we know they're not in it? How do we know that Dylan Scott's not in this discussion? Like, I wouldn't want to call it, but it's going to make for a great race. But JK, we assume, is going for it, and that's his goal.
Absolutely. He would not be racing if he wasn't. The one thing about him, and I'm sure a lot of the other athletes are like this too, but James is a great racer. Like he really feeds off the competition. Being his sister, I know that firsthand because everything when we were growing up was a competition. The boy probably really needed a brother to give him proper competition because I tried, but I don't think I've ever beaten him in anything, if I'm being honest. He really is a great racer. But like any athlete, he has I'm not going to say good or bad races, but he has races that he still learns from. And I know Vegas was one of those races for him. It just wasn't his day. But I think, and you'll probably agree with this, I'm sure, Coach Marshy, is that I think every athlete needs those races to really then experience the good races, and be able to want the good more. I don't think you want to go in. You want to go in with confidence in your own fitness, but you don't want to be going in with the expectations that it's going to come easy. So I think for every athlete out there, and we've seen that with the likes of Hunter, who dominated the sport for so many years, to then come in fifth at the World Championships. I think it's really great for an athlete to have those moments within his career, those highs and those lows. It's just life, isn't it? It teaches you a lot.
Yeah, no, and just to add to what he's saying, I think it's then without those bad days, they're never going to learn how to peak for the good day either. So they need to take all that information. Or I'm sure JK touched on it when he talked to Greg and Lauren when he won Hong Kong, about sort of being more, now he's more data driven than he ever was before. And I remember him saying that, because I always think about how much data are people actually looking at, and someone like Greg on the Rocks Life is obviously really known for that. But within the coaching programs now, it'll be interesting to talk to Shane Orr actually to see if he's very data driven. I don't know if if he is, but there's this kind of Anthony Perricini seems to be very data driven, and it seems to have massively made a difference. But the data on the bad days is probably contributing to create the good days.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I do know just through James that Shane Orr is one of those as well, who is very, data driven. And I think you have to be, as a coach. I think you have to be able to look at it, logically, rather than just going off feel. And I think the other thing that James does really well, I know I'm just, big talk up of my brother here, but how can I not, is he's really willing to learn. And that can be a hard thing to do as an athlete and a coach, as I'm sure you know. James is really willing to learn, and he has learned so much from being coached by Anthony. I know he's learned not only to be data driven, but he's learned what works. Before being coached by Anthony, James was probably training at a running pace that was too fast for him. He wasn't dialing in on those thresholds that he is now. I'm not going to give away all of his training, but I think as an athlete and a coach, as I say, or just as a human being, I think we have to always be willing to learn more and be willing to know that when we don't know everything. And, you made a good point before that I've noticed the same with Hunter McIntyre, that he does look a bit more composed than he has in recent races, where he's liked to be that one always in the lead. That was always his game plan. I don't know for a fact at all, but I think I have heard that Hunter has hired a coach. So whether that's something that he's learned as well. And I think every athlete out there, anyone who's listening, always just be willing to learn, because you can never stop learning. Honestly, you can never stop.
So I've always, through my career, and I've sort of stuck with this even sort of now nearly 20 years in to what I'm doing. But I've always said to anyone that is under my kind of coaching program, I might be your coach, but you need to be a sponge and you need to absorb everything that you get coming in. Then we can talk about what you've heard, what you've read, what you've listened to, who's told you. And then we can try and work out what bits of that work for you the best or fit into your program to develop you and increase you as an athlete. So that's kind of always been my approach, and it's worked. It has worked we are majority recreational level, but it's worked. People run half marathons faster because of that approach. People, get the sub 4 hour marathon that they really want. And that's that kind of approach of learning. And I completely agree. I think learning is the only way to improve. If you're arrogant and you think you know it all, then you've got no chance, because everything around you is moving quicker than that in terms of data and methodology. So, and the truth, be interesting to know what you think. You're talking to a lot of people. Do we know the formula for this sport just yet, or are we still learning?
I think we're still learning. And you know what? I don't know if there's ever going to be one way. Look, I might be stand corrected one day. There might be one way to train and win this sport. But I just think it's one of those sports that is really unlike any other because it's got so many different facets. And I'm talking purely about Hyrox here, not hybrid as well, which is a whole nother thing you can discuss. But Hyrox as a sport in particular, there's your compromised running, which, if my brother's listening to this right now, sorry, Jim, I know you don't like to say it's compromised running. It's just running, according to James. But there is, your running component. There's all this different station work. There's so many different, muscle groups and areas that you need to work on. It can be really difficult, I believe, to find that balance. And I'm sure you would know this much more than me being a coach yourself, that to find that balance between, your strength conditioning and your aerobic, capacity as well. I just don't know if we're ever going to find that there's one way, but I'm sure there's going to be people out there who continue to test different ways to train and therefore hopefully win at this sport. And I'm really interested to see all of that as it transpires.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think that's exactly how it will go. So, let's talk like Tia and James as well, like, and anyone else come in from CrossFit. I mean, Ricky did it as well, didn't he?
He did, yeah. So Ricky Garrard was there. For all your listeners, we literally just had the Brisbane event this past weekend, and we had a fair few CrossFitters. Actually, we had Ricky do the men's pro. He almost broke the hour. I know that was his goal. So for a bit of context, Ricky raced the last Hyrox race he did was back in Sydney in 2023. I'm going to say he went about a 102. Maybe mid there, 102.30 odd, might have even been 40 odd. I know he broke a good 2 minutes off his PB there, just didn't sneak under the hour, unfortunately, but ran a great race nonetheless. Of course, we had Hunter McIntyre racing down there, but he's not an Aussie, so we won't get into him. We've touched on him enough. But, having him down there definitely brought the crowd as well. But we also had a lot doing the mixed double. So, we've mentioned, Clair Toomey, amazing to have her and James Newbury out there again with the mixed doubles race. They came second to Hunter McIntyre and Joanna Weitrzyk, who placed first with a time of, I think they did a 51.20 for the mixed doubles, which was about 22 seconds off the world record. And that world record's held by Ronk. And I think her name is Alice. I don't really know her that well, but an amazing race to watch. I mean, Hunter and Joanna definitely kind of dominated from about midway onwards, if not even after like the sled pull onwards. But Tia and James Newbury ran an incredible race for two CrossFitters. And what I mean by that is, when I watch them racing in Melbourne, you can tell that their training back then was still very CrossFit dominated. Whereas I know over the last kind of 6 to 8 weeks, they really dialed in on their running in particular. And James Kelly was actually providing them with a training plan. So they were able to knock, I think it was about 2.5 minutes off their PB. I can't recall I know their times in Melbourne was about a 55 something and they did a 53, I believe. So they're competing in the age group world championships as far as I know, because they have qualified. But yeah, on top of them, sorry, you go.
And the relay, hopefully.
Yes, hopefully the relay. You can't forget about that. I know you guys are keen to see that one.
There is another question around that. If you put 2 and 2 together and get 4 when you look at social media, based on some other things we sort of saw at the end of Vegas, it looks like Tia and Joanna are gonna go for Elite 15 women's doubles. Can you confirm that in any way?
I hope Joanna doesn't mind me confirming that, but yes, they will be competing. What race? I'm not entirely sure. Look, it could even be Houston, which is happening literally next weekend. But yes, I do know that they are competing, which is going to be quite incredible to watch. And if it is Houston, what a race that will be, because I'm pretty sure I've heard that Lauren Weeks and Lauren Griffith from USA are competing together in that particular one. Is there any other women? Not that I know of within, I just know that my brother James and Jake Dearden, as well as I think it might be Dylan Scott and someone I'm not sure of their name, are also competing in Houston. That's on the men's side, obviously. But yes, I have heard and confirmed that Joanna and Tia are racing together.
I mean, you just made me think. I've not actually seen or heard whether Kate and Zara are teaming up for that.
I have heard they are. I've
Yeah.
heard they are. Might
But I
be
think
that
our Olympia event is going to be, our London event is going to have a qualification, I think, for the Elite 15
right.
doubles.
You are right. So possibly there.
Maybe that makes sense. Yeah, no, I mean, Joanna and Tia in a doubles, what a team, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, it will be great to watch. And yeah, look, I'll leave any more details to, you know, Joanna or Tia to get into, but just having talked to Joanna over the weekend, I think they're already coming up with their game plan, and I think they could be big contenders to win the whole damn thing, to be honest, just with Joanna's running and Tia's strength. I mean, what a combo.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be huge. And then I'm going to ask you about yourself. We've seen you out there on the dance floor itself. You've been out there and done Hyrox, right? So
I have. Yeah. Yeah. No, I've done a couple now. I've done a few doubles. Doubles with my husband, Dan. We're still married after that, so thank God. I've done, my first race was actually with Georgie, so James's girlfriend / now fiance. And I have to say, I mean, as you would probably know, Coach Marshy, or anyone listening, your first Hyrox, whether it's a doubles or not, it can be very daunting. And doing it with one of the fittest girls that I know personally, Georgie Vesley, was quite a big ordeal. I mean, I really had to keep up with her that day, but it was so much fun. And, you know, like anyone else doing this sport, you just get hooked, don't you? So, yeah, no, I've done about 4 now and definitely plan to do some more in the future. You know, I'd like to say that I'm the real athlete in the family, but I think everyone will know I'm kind of joking there. I mean, James kind of has that tagline down pat.
And does James sort of program you? Does he give you a hand with that?
He does, yeah. So I'm definitely going to be jumping on the proven programming. So anyone, you know, I know we've already talked about it, but James has, you know, teamed up with Clair Toomey and Shane Orr. They've got an incredible program in place. You can jump on board, and I think you can even get 30 days free for the proven app. But yeah, very well structured programming James has. I believe he was originally working in 6-week blocks. I think they've now gone to 8-week blocks. A lot of what he does, you know, he'll really be testing where your current fitness is, which is one thing I really enjoy. So a lot of, you know, say week 1 is really testing where your strength is. So testing those compound movements, your squats, your deadlift, your barbell press, testing your thresholds. I've done with James the lactate threshold test a couple of times. So that can be quite tough. But yeah, no, I mean, it's great having a brother, I guess, that's not only an Elite 15 athlete, but a coach as well, because it means I can kind of get free advice whenever I want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you said this is like a joint venture for you guys. You know, I think I gave my opinion at the beginning about why I think it's great. What's the long-term goal with it?
Yeah, I mean, look, long-term goal, I mean, I'm from a journalism background myself, so this is definitely, I guess, a bit of a passion project. I think long-term, I would love to see it grow into, you know, not just focusing on Hyrox, but focusing on other hybrid events that are popping up all across the country here. And it's really just being able to bring, you know, quality content. You know, I love interviewing people, particularly athletes, and finding out more about their story, as I'm sure you do as well. But I also love doing the episodes with my brother. It's a nice thing because we actually don't live in the same state. You know, James and I are originally from Queensland. James still lives up there, but I live in Sydney, New South Wales, with my husband now. And we don't get to see each other all the time. We talk every day, but we don't get to see each other all the time. So it's a really enjoyable thing that we get to do together. And yeah, I would just love to be able to, you know, I think we've been able to do a good job at creating a bit of a sense of community down here. I love after each Hyrox event down here, I very quickly post up all the results and really try and follow all the athletes, because I kind of want to know, what they're up to, other events that they might be doing, what's their background, how do they get into this sport. And a lot of them now, I'm finding they really tag our page to let us know what they're up to. And I think that's one thing I really love about it, to be honest, Coach Marshy, is I just love being able to, as I'm sure you would within your own community, is bring that sense of community together, even if it's an online platform. It's just, it's a great thing to do. And as much as doing the live streams that I do can be very overwhelming and very tiring, if I'm being honest, thank you to anyone who watched it and provided comments on that just recently, because everyone was so lovely. It really honestly warms my heart just knowing that people can get so much from our page and our socials now, and our podcast, that just that sense of community that we're able to create. And again, not just at Hyrox events, but hybrid sport and hybrid fitness kind of across this APAC region.
Yeah, and I mean, I can only talk for myself, but anything I need to know about your part of the world, I just go straight to your page, because if it's to know, you'll have the answer, which is fantastic. And we're lucky enough to have sort of, obviously Greg is worldwide because of the Rocks Life and now his role with Hyrox, but obviously there's quite a few of us. A few have dropped off actually, which is a shame, that I listened to in the early days, but that were almost inspiration for this, but they've kind of gone away now. But we've got Ian, we've got the Rad-chicks, I'm doing my bit, and we all offer, it's all very slightly different. And I know there's people that will consume all 4 or 5 sort of platforms because we all offer that slight different approach to it, which is great. And you're from a journalism background. To be fair, the growth of the sport might rely on this to grow as well. As an aspect, it will need us to grow the sport as well.
Oh, it definitely will. And I think you make such a good point there, because I kind of owe it to all of you guys that I even got into this space in the first place, because I was one of those listeners for probably about 12 months. No one in Australia had really heard of this thing called Hyrox yet. I'd only heard of it through my brother. And even then, I didn't really know what it was. I remember kind of watching one of his first races, snippets of it online, going, oh, yeah, that sport looks cool. It looks like it really suits him, just knowing my brother's fitness level. And, after that, I started listening to a lot of the content. Greg from Rocks Life runs a great podcast, as you say, global now. His touch points, Ian, and then yourself, and the Rad-chicks are fantastic, and Matt B. Davis. And I think you make such a good point that everyone kind of has a point of difference. But the one thing I've found, now being someone who's within this space myself, is everyone is so supportive of each other. And I really love that we've all been able to, the fact that I've even been on your podcast now, I'd love to have you on mine as well.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then, obviously I've been on Ian's, and I've been on the Rad-chicks as well. And it's great to have such a community within the media space, because, if we're being honest, there's not really a lot of money here. If you want to know that, listeners, there's not really a lot of money in it. We all kind of do it for the love of the sport and for the love of the community. And it's really great to have just such great people behind the scenes really doing it for those reasons.
Yeah, I think, I'll echo that, because the passion's the driver. To be fair, if we wanted to be here for money, we'd have done something else. But we don't need to be here for money, because the passion is what will drive it. And all the people you've mentioned, you don't have to listen to many episodes of any of those to see that passion like almost shining through in a voice. If you're not watching it, if you're just listening to the audio side, you can hear it. You can hear the passion and the desire people have to find out the stories, report on the elites, talk about the background and the sponsorship of the elites and all those things. Like the passion's there to understand it. And actually, if I was just a fan, I would want to know all of that stuff, because I did it on the CrossFit journey. So why is that any different now? I still do it on the CrossFit journey. I'm going to do it I'm on the hybrid journey. I want to know, as much as I'm here, like putting this podcast out, I still want to know what I can about the sport. And without you guys and your episodes, I wouldn't be across it. but I'm across it because you guys give all that information. So yeah, no, I echo those thoughts as well. Cool. So here's the question. You have touched on other hybrid sports, and I will let you disclose as much or as little as you wish when it comes to my opening point where I said, and hybrid sport going deadly down under. So I've done a deadly dozen, founded, what is it? Well, it's a 4-hour drive for me, Macclesfield. But we've done it. We've done one. We've done a full track event. My gym has hosted a deadly strong. And I've been to report on a fit test as well. I've met Jason in person. I interviewed him quite early on in the process, as did Ian Kay on UK Fitness Racing as well. So we got it out there. And obviously Matt B. Davis has done it as well from an American side of things. And then Australia, deadly dozen. And you seem to be well involved in the reporting on that. So let us know what you know.
Oh, I know probably quite a lot because lucky me and my husband are actually the ones bringing the event out here, which we are very excited about. So we first touched base with Jason, what I want to say, maybe even less than 6 months ago. I'd kind of been following Deadly Dozen over there for a good solid, 6 months. And I just knew that this event was something that would take off so well here in Australia, because you even pointed it out earlier in the episode today, Coach Marshy, that one thing we do have up on you guys in the UK is our weather. So the thought of being able to run, a hybrid fitness event out at the tracks, I could not think of a better place than Australia to do that. So I'd kind of been keeping an eye on it, but didn't really know a lot about, I guess, what their business model was. And without getting into too much of the details, my husband and I met with Jason online and had a few different discussions with him. And we're now the ones, bringing that out. And we're so excited to be a part of the Deadly Dozen team. But to be bringing this event down under, we've got the first track event happening in Sydney in May. So anyone listening who doesn't know yet, we've got that happening on Saturday, the 24th of May out at Sylvania Waters Athletics Track. We've got some great, sponsors and people who will be there. We've already launched ticket sales as well. You can sign up on deadlydozen.com. I think we have sold, I want to say, about 30% of tickets already, which is great to see. And I have no doubt that once, similar to Hyrox, I think the growth will take about a season, but it's incredible to see how quickly Deadly Dozen has grown in the UK. And, if I compare it to Hyrox, I just have no doubt that we kind of know that this year is going to be a bit of a tester year. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from, hosting the events here. We've got one planned in Brisbane in October. We haven't released the date yet, but I can kind of say it's around late October. But one great thing about Deadly Dozen, Coach Marshy, that I'm sure you'd already know, is that a little bit different to Hyrox, we have the capacity to be able to run these events at regional towns. Australia, for us, it is a very, very widespread country. And as we were touching on earlier, I don't really know if Hyrox itself is going to grow here in Australia outside of the cities such as Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth, and then over in New Zealand. But one thing that we will be able to do with Deadly Dozen, and we're already looking at for next year, is to be running this not only in our capital cities, but in our regional towns that really already have huge communities of fitness. So we're looking at, I'm sure some of your listeners won't know the towns I'm talking about, but Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, they'll probably know Goldie. Newcastle, Canberra, Wollongong, Geelong, down in Victoria. There's just so many regional towns that we could bring this event to. And then we've obviously got the gym events going on as well. So we've got our first one coming up in April here in Sydney. So it's kind of all happening. And it's a really good aspect of, our hybrid sport media umbrella. It is under that umbrella for us that we'll be running these events. So I'm just really excited to be able to bring it here, and excited to see how it can grow across Australia as well.
I mean, the thing that strikes me about Australia and probably similar in South Africa as well, with them having it there, is that, so in the UK, we can sign up for Deadly Dozen on like the 14th of July, our summer, our height of summer, and you could get the coldest, wettest day ever. Whereas you guys, the percentages are a lot more in favour of that not happening. But the fact that that can happen and Jason still sold those events out kind of says what the hype is like here for hybrid. You guys are, you're showing the same with Hyrox. So in a climate where it suits Deadly Dozen, I mean, sky's the limit here, surely.
Oh, it definitely is. We're probably almost the opposite in terms of our climates. The months that we probably cannot hold an event here is our summertime because it's almost going to be too hot. But who knows? As you say, as Deadly Dozen grows, we probably will be able to and still be able to sell those tickets because I just have no doubt. I mean, we've already got so many of our Hyroxes, I say, jumping on board for Deadly Dozen. You know, even my brother talks about it being, you know, if you are someone who's really focused on, you know, Hyrox World Championships, Deadly Dozen is a great training race for that. It's a great almost simulation that you can really test out that quicker running with stations that, yeah, might be lighter weights, but they're more reps. And I'll tell you what, I've done a Deadly Dozen at the gym, just on an assault runner. Do not think that the 400 meters makes it any easier than a Hyrox, guys.
Mate, it was worse.
It's almost worse. Yep, I agree.
I'm proud to say that I've done a many Hyrox categories. I've done a DEKA fit and I've done a Deadly Dozen, and I've done them all solo. Deadly Dozen was the hardest.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was less time as well, in some cases, in terms of like the actual time that you're taking part in the event. But yeah, I mean, those shoulders, and then you think, oh, I'll be all right because my legs will be fine for the run. But it's 400 meters, so you get competitive and you blow up and you make a mistake because you go too hard. And it was a great experience. I've only done one, but we've now got some in the south as well where we are, which is great. So we're going to be attacking those races in Birmingham as well in the Midlands. So we're going to be attacking them this year here, but it'll be great to see what happens. And it'd be good to do another episode with you after that event, and we can get a full report from you on how it went down under with Deadly Dozen.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'd love to because I'm really excited to see some new names possibly pop up. I mean, it's one of those events I'm sure we're going to see some of the Hyroxes dominate, but, you know, we've been kind of chatting to people, you know, within run clubs as well that are more from that sprinting background. So it's just going to be really interesting to see who starts dominating the sport of Deadly Dozen.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And I mentioned it there. Quick word on DEKA in Australia. Where are we at with it?
Yeah, look, DEKA, they do have an event coming up in Melbourne next weekend on the 15th, which is great. You know, DEKA's one of those events I would love to see more of it. It seems to be quite dominated in Victoria, in Melbourne at the moment, but I'm really hoping that we'll be able to see that kind of spread out across Sydney, across Brisbane, and across our western states. It's such a great event. We've also got events such as the Turf Games down here are quite big. That's more of a team event. I think you guys might have.
Yeah, we've got Turf.
You've got Turf Games as well. We've got another one called. I hope I'm not going to get the name wrong here, but it's called Peloton, I believe, that we were just my husband and I actually chatting about this morning, and that's an event kind of similar to a Deadly Dozen out at athletics tracks, but it's got more of the erg machines out there. So there's definitely a fair few. You know, we're kind of probably a year or two behind you guys in the UK where these events are now popping up. So you know what? I just think that any type of events, big, medium, small, they all support each other, right? The more that we can do and we can get out there. I mean, our vision really with Deadly Dozen, for example, is to be able to have, you know, one event in each state per month. And that might be in different cities, but it's just being able to provide more of these hybrid fitness events more regularly, and particularly to our, you know, more remote communities. So I just think it's great to see any of these events pop up, and I'm really here, you know, from Hybrid Sport Media to support any of them, because I just think they all support each other in the end.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear, and that's exciting for the industry, which is fantastic. So yeah, no, really good, really excited to see how it goes, and we'll get you on again to discuss it. Like I said, that will be really good. But for today, we've reached everything. I'm sure we could talk all day, I'm sure,
Yes.
but we'll wrap it up now, and I'm sure you'll be on again. And like you asked, I'm happy to come on and talk from an English perspective to your listeners as well, and say what we're doing over here. But thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And where can people follow you?
Yeah, you can follow us at Hybrid Sport Media, or head to our website, www.hybridsportmedia.com. But yeah, just hit us up. We're mainly there on socials, on our Instagram. So definitely go and check us out. Or of course on Spotify. We kind of do weekly podcasts at this stage, usually with my brother, but sometimes it's just myself and an athlete. Yeah, I'm loving the podcast world.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And to all our listeners today, thanks for coming on. Thanks for listening, watching, wherever it is you are. Please leave us a comment. It's always good to hear what your thoughts were on the episode. Obviously, like and share. It makes a huge difference to all of us in this space. And without you guys, we wouldn't be able to continue and exist. So please do share it on if you think there's anyone you know that would like to hear it. But for today, thanks again, Bernice, and thanks to everyone that has listened. And we will meet here again to discuss more on the rocks.